Alright, let's get it. Trying to feed these Steam Deck fans. Alright, I got some news for them. Oh, so you want to know if you can run Assassin's Creed Shadows and what's the other one here? Lost Souls aside? Okay, I got both the system requirements here. So let me go through all of them. So it says here, Ubisoft release details Assassin's Creed Shadows PC requirement, and Assassin's Creed Shadows is coming to PCs and console March 20th, bringing the series to Japan for the first time ahead of the game launch. Ubisoft release detailed PC system requirements for Assassin's Creed Shadows. Additionally, Ubisoft has confirmed that the game features XeSS 2, DLSS 3.7, and FSR 3.1. Other features for this game includes a bit and benchmarking tools and ultra-wide screen support. Furthermore, the game supports dynamic resolution HDR multi-monitor screen setup. Currently, Ubisoft has not revealed plans to support DLSS 4 or FSR 4. Then it says here, on PC, ray tracing will be available for global illumination and reflection. Note that ray tracing cannot be fully disabled in this game. While non-ray tracing hardware is supported, a proprietary ray tracing solution delivers similar effects. Note, with selective ray tracing is only used in the game hideout. Like most modern PC games, Assassin's Creed Shadows is DirectX 12 title. The game also requires SSD storage to run well on PC. Yeah. Now, it says Assassin's Creed PC selective ray tracing. Minimum resolution and FPS using dynamic resolution and upscale 1080p at 30 FPS. Visual settings low. CPU Intel Core i7 8700K and AMD Ryzen 5 3600. GPU NVIDIA GeForce RTX 1070, 8 gigs of video RAM, and AMD Radeon RX 5700, 8 gigs of video RAM. Intel Arc 580, 8 gigs of video RAM. And then it says rebar on. Recommended resolution, FPS using dynamic resolution and upscale 1080p at 60 FPS. Visual settings high. CPU Intel Core i5 11600K, AMD Ryzen 5 5600X, GPU NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3060 Ti, 8 gigs, and AMD Radeon RX 6700 XT, 12 gigs / Intel Arc B580 12 gigs, rebar on. Now, enthusiast says here, resolution / FPS using dynamic resolution and upscaling, 1440p at 60 FPS. Visual settings high. CPU Intel Core i5 11600, AMD Ryzen 5 5600X, GPU NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070, 8 gigs of video RAM, AMD Radeon RX 6700 XT, 12 gigs of video RAM, Intel Arc B580, 12 gigs of video RAM, rebar on. Now, resolution / FPS upscaling, dynamic resolution and upscaling 4K at 60 FPS. Visual settings high. CPU Intel Core i7 12700K, AMD Ryzen 7 5800X3D, GPU NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4070 Ti, Super 16 gigs, AMD Radeon RX 7900 XT, 20 gigs. Now, keep moving here. And then it says Assassin's Creed Shadows is the first game in the series to feature ray tracing. In standard ray tracing mode, ray tracing is only used for global illumination. For extended ray tracing, it is used for both global illumination and reflections. Now, standard ray tracing, minimum resolution FPS using dynamic resolution and upscaling 1080p at 30 FPS. Visual settings high. CPU Intel Core i7 8700K, AMD Ryzen 5 3600, GPU NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070, 8 gigs of video RAM, NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070, 8 gigs of video RAM, Intel RB580, 12 gigs of video RAM, and rebar on. Now recommended resolution, FPS using dynamic resolution and upscaling, 1440p at 60 FPS, visual settings high, CPU Intel Core i5 11600K, AMD Ryzen 5 5600X, GPU NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4070, 12 gigs of video RAMs, and AMD Radeon RX 7800 XT, 16 gigs of video RAM, extended ray tracing, enthusiast resolution / FPS using dynamic resolution and upscaling, 1440p at 60 FPS, visual settings ultra, CPU Intel Core Intel i7 13700K, AMD Ryzen 7 7800 X3D, GPU NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4080, 16 gigs, and then extreme resolution / FPS using dynamic resolution and upscaling, 4K at 60 FPS, visual settings ultra, CPU Intel Core i7 13700K, AMD Ryzen 7 7800 X3D, and GPU NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4090, 24 gigs of video RAM, that is. Yeah, and that should do it for Assassin's Creed. Now, Shadows. Now, for, what's the other one here? Now for Lost Soul Aside. Ready? Now, so it says here, Sony and Alta Zero Games have released detailed PC requirements for the PC version of Lost Souls Aside, one of those interesting PlayStation published titles from Sony late State of Play event. The game is coming to PC and PlayStation 5 on May 30th and appear to be an interesting mix of Dark Soul and DMC. That means Devil May Cry. It says here, as is normal for modern PC games, Lost Soul Aside should be installed on SSD storage. The game requires 80 gigs of storage, which is fairly average for today's standard. Furthermore, the game can be played on PC with and without ray tracing enabled. On PC, Sony has promised optimized 4K graphics, ray tracing, DualSense controller support, and high dynamic range HDR display support. Note that this game development recommends playing the game with a controller. If you use a keyboard and mouse, you may have a subpar experience. Maybe they need to fix that. Then they say here, below are the official PC requirements of Lost Soul Aside. Sadly, resolution, frame rates, and settings targets have not been released. This limit and usefulness of information below. Note that this game has a higher CPU and GPU hardware requirement when ray trace is enabled. Furthermore, it should be noted that Ultra Ray Tracing recommends an RTX 50 series GPU. Yeah, and it says the game recommends GPU are AMD RX 5700, NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060. Hopefully, these GPUs will target 1080p at 60 FPS. Since this is a fast-paced action title, we would hope that this game recommends hardware would target 60 FPS. Frame rates. Now, for the system requirements, PC specs for Lost Soul Aside. It says here, what do we got? Minimum GPU NVIDIA GTX 1060 or AMD RX 5500 XT, CPU Intel Core i5 10400 or AMD Ryzen 5 3600, 16 gigs of RAM, OS 64-bit Windows 10, Windows 11, and storage 80 gigs of SSD. Now, recommended. Says here for GPU NVIDIA RTX 2060 or AMD RX 5700 XT, CPU Intel i5 10400 or AMD Ryzen 5 3600. RAM 16 gigs. OS 64-bit Windows 10 and Windows 11. Storage 80 gigs of SSD. Now for the high specs. High. GPU RTX 3070 or AMD RX 6800 XT. CPU Intel i7 11700 or AMD Ryzen 7 5700X. And I got the cat here. Came to visit me. Come here. Come on. You know you want to get up here. Come on. Anyway, it says here GPU NVIDIA RTX 3070 or AMD RX 6800. CPU Intel i7 11700 or AMD Ryzen 7 5700X. RAM 16 gigs. OS Windows 10 64-bit, Windows 10 and 11, and storage 80 gigs of storage SSD. Now for the high ray tracing on, this is GPU NVIDIA RTX 4080 or AMD RX 7900 XT. CPU Intel i7 11700 or AMD Ryzen 7 5700X. RAM 16 gigs. OS Windows 10 and 11. And storage is 80 gigs of SSD. Now, for ultra ray tracing on, it's GPU RTX 5070 Ti, CPU Intel i7 13700K, or AMD Ryzen 7 7800X, or you could use the XT or XTX. RAM is 16 gigs. OS is Windows 10 64-bit or Windows 11. And storage, 80 gigs of SSD. Now it says on PC the game will be available through Steam and the Epic Game Store. And that should do it. So you got both specs for Assassin's Creed and Lost Souls. Lost Souls comes out on May 30th. On May 30th. And Assassin's Creed, if I can get this here, comes out, let's see, when does Assassin, on March 20th. So yeah, that should do it. So you guys are good. News, deals, games, update, the usual. Yeah, you guys are good. So get your portable PCs ready for these games when they come out. Increase your internal storage, your SSD, to collect all your, your system updates, all your protons, the apps that you use, whether you're using Chai or Creo, whatever apps that you're using. And you put your games like on a, say, 512 gigabyte or 1 terabyte, 1.5, 2, or even 4. Yeah, micro SD cards. And if you got the docking station that comes with the external SSD support, you're good. Or you can mount one to it. So yeah, on laptop and desktop, you can put whatever size storage you want on them. They have no limits. So yeah. Anyway, but that should do it though. For as gaming is concerned, you and your Assassin's Creed and your Lost Soul. Yeah, you got plenty of games to play in 2025. So when people are saying that games are boring in 2025, they're not gamers. They don't play video games. They don't finish their games. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Nice talking to you people again. Crystal, Star Wars, Star Trek Fan, Port, Dark Side. Go. Peace. Uh-oh.